Welcome to our talk on 4 ways to create learning that people will love using games and immersive technologies. Now, we're not just going to be talking about, we're going to show you some real-world examples, some real big brands, some global brands, for example, like Tetra Pak and Yum. We're going to be covering things that they've been asking us to work about, which are really big for them, things like cybersecurity, workplace onboarding, and health and safety.
So we're also going to be giving you some practical tips so that you can try and implement these in your organizations as well. And
nothing's worse than a passive learner. So we want to see some active learners, so I want you guys to get involved. So feel free, you've got your phones out anyway. If you want to log on to slido.com, use a capital R465, we're going to ask you a couple of questions throughout our presentation. So we'll actually get some real life, in the moment feedback, just sort of get an idea of what you guys are thinking, straw poll straight away. So that will happen, not immediately, but just give you a bit of forewarning. So a little intro. My name is Jason Butler. I'm a games developer. I've been working in the games industry for nearly 10 years. I've been working at Sponge for 5, and I'm a real big evangelist for using games in digital learning.
And I'm Lucy Gibbs. I'm an innovation producer at Sponge. So my job is to make sure we're always scanning the horizons for new technology that can be used for learning, and also turning ideas into a reality.
And if you don't know who Sponge are, we're Europe's largest independent custom digital learning provider. It's also a big year for us. It's our 15th anniversary of working with global clients delivering seriously creative digital learning. And to top all that off, it was almost like it was worked out serendipity, this year we were made the Learning Provider of the Year Gold winner for the Learning Awards, which shows that what we do does actually drive business success. And why do we need to make learning that people love? Because let's be honest, people don't really normally love it. There's normally a real barrier to people having successful learning. One of it is access. People only normally have about 1% of their daily week to put aside to learning, which is a big barrier, because obviously you've got to catch their attention and make sure you hold their attention. And also, let's be honest, if you're telling someone on Monday morning you're doing some compliance training, you're not going to be excited about Monday morning. So 46% of people say dull content is a barrier. There's this preconception a lot of time about learning. There's a lot of text, click next, a lot more text. So we want to make it much more interesting, much more engaging. And also, there's a recent study showed that globally, 32% drop in attention span, that whole TLDR thing. Their attention span's so small, they can't even say too long didn't read. It's TLDR. So we have to make sure that when we have got their attention, we keep their attention and also retain that and use it to our advantage to make sure that we're driving success. Now, we mentioned at the start, we want you to get involved, so we're going to ask you a little question. You've only got one choice, unfortunately, but if we were to offer your learners, or if you were to offer your learners some learning, which type do you think they would love the most? Learning that's fun and enjoyable, relevant and contextual, social and collaborative, so maybe a bit of teamwork, enriching and developmental to their role, or empowering and self-directed.
So let's launch the poll.
Let's see.
So you should be able to vote on your phones. The code is there again if you need it.
Fun and enjoyable, good shout. Empowering and self-directed, nice. See, being a games man, I like fun and enjoyable. But people obviously, it's shifting live. We're going to give you about a minute, so just smash out some stats, but still way ahead, fun and enjoyable. Let's be honest, nobody wants boring learning. Okay, when we hit 50, I think we might call it there, because there's an out-and-out winner, let's be honest. Okay, we're going to go with fun and enjoyable, which is really good to know, because obviously dull content is going to turn off your learners really, really quickly. You want them to get engaged and get involved. So fun and enjoyable, that's good to know. So that leads on nicely.
Yeah, that's really good for you, Jason, as a games developer. Fun and enjoyable being the key thing that we're kind of trying to promote here. It was a bit of a mean question, really, because obviously all of those things are important to get people to love their learning. And we are talking about people loving their learning today, not just liking, loving their learning. Now, at Sponge, we really care about striving to make sure that we don't just make learning experiences that people tolerate, we actually want them to love it. Especially with, as Jason mentioned, there's a kind of attention span dropping. In order to grab people's attention enough to learn, you need to make sure that what you produce for them is good and something that's going to motivate them, inspire them, and actually help them do their jobs better. Today, we're going to be covering 4 ways to help you do that. And we're going to be focusing on 2 of the most exciting technologies at the moment. So we're going to be talking about immersive learning. So this is things like VR, 360 video, and we're also going to be talking about games. Now, in those 4 ways, we're going to have 2 in immersive and 2 in games. So the first one is exploration. Everyone likes to learn at their own pace and be able to get to the information they need as quickly as they can. Now, for the business benefit is that if you can make explorative learning, the learners will then start foraging for the learning themselves and actually help themselves to the content they need as and when they need it.
And also in games, there's a real key point of games is that whole element of mastery. Now, if you can get your learners to accelerate from zero to no knowledge up to being masters at something, that's got a great advantage for having a very accelerated performance and knowledge of your workers and your learners.
The next will be experience. It's much better to actually try something yourself rather than just reading about it. And the business benefit is that you'll get people more confident to apply their knowledge straight away if they feel like they've experienced it before.
And also, we very rarely from a young age learn everything on our own. It's normally learned from somebody else or from our peers. And it's a really powerful tool to help sort of cohese a team together. And it's also a really good way to create a really engaged and motivated workforce.
So we're going to be starting with immersive tech and exploration. Now we've got a really lovely quote here from Frank Borman, who's an astronaut. Now obviously flying to the moon is quite an elaborate sense of human exploration, but you also can get that on a much humbler scale within your learning. Now Knowles tells us that it's really important to give adults in particular self-directed learning experiences. There's nothing more frustrating than going through a learning experience that feels that it's going too quickly for you or equally too slowly. You can show that you're considerate of your learners' time by making sure that they can find the information they need as and when they need it. And the great thing about immersive technology is we can now make explorative experiences that are much more exciting than ever before. We've got a really nice example here to show you. This was a desktop 360 immersive tour that we created for Tetra Pak. Now, you may or may not have heard of Tetra Pak, but chances are you've seen their products. So they are a massive global brand. If you go home and look in your fridge, turn over your juice carton, chances are Tetra Pak made that carton that's in your fridge. They're a really big brand, and they gave us their challenge that they are a really innovative and inspiring company. But they wanted their induction to be able to reflect that too for their new starters. They also had the challenge that they had the people in the head office not knowing what it was like on the factory floor, and they wanted to give people a more holistic view of the company. So a tour is a really great way to do this. We'll take a look at this now. So as you can see, what we created for them was Tetra World. It's a kind of illustrated example. It's a map. There's no linear journey here. You can go through any order you like and find the content you need. We do have little triggers to help people along the way, though, if they're finding it hard to find. Now, each of those hotspots on that map takes you to a 360 world in which you can explore. So you can see this is an example here for Tetra Pak for one of their reception areas. So you can have a look at that in 360 video. We also like to have a presenter in these kind of 360 environments. And that's to make sure that, particularly for new starters, they want to be having a personable experience. If this is their first impression of a company, it's really nice to have a friendly face to greet you. And this is jam-packed full of videos of real people from Tetra Pak saying about their experience of Tetra Pak and why they like working there. So we're being guided through by this presenter. Quite often what we have people come up to us and say is, hang on, if we don't do a linear journey, how do we make sure that people have covered all the content that they need to? Now, the first thing we'd say to that is, trust your learners, especially when they're new. They'll already be motivated to get the information they need. And if you can help them explore and find it quicker, that's even better. But we've also built in, you just saw there, we gained a star. We've got added game mechanics to this to make it, to help people see how far through the experience they are. So you can probably see in the top right-hand example, I've got a little tally of how many stars I've collected. Now this will indicate to the learner how much content they've gone through and help them to discover it all without kind of forcing them down a linear path. There's also shortcuts to the content. So you can see within the 360 environment, we've got these hotspots that are clickable. They launch extra content about, the company mission, the values, but we've also, if you want to jump to that content even quicker, we've got this side panel which you can pull out, which will help you get to the information you need even quicker than before. So if you are a learner that doesn't want to kind of look around and do all that immersive stuff, you can just go in and find the content that you need straight away. Now, we've already had really great feedback from Tetra Pak on this, and it's really helped to confirm the learner's choice to have started at Tetra Pak, that they got faced on their first day with a really exciting and immersive experience. This lends itself well to things like induction, but it can also be really good if you're going through like a change, any kind of transformation, and you want people to really believe in it. The best way to do that is to give them the chance to go through the content themselves at their own pace so that they can start persuading themselves of the change. It's great for kind of customer journeys and also processes. So that was exploration. Now Jason's going to lead us on to mastery.
Yes. Great thing about games, as I said, I'm an evangelist for games, is they're pretty much hardwired for learning. You may not think that, you think they're hardwired for fun, but actually a really well-designed game takes somebody who has no idea what the content's going to be, helps them to understand the content and how to play the mechanic of the game, and eventually gives them mastery and the ability to succeed. Now, as that's hardwired into a game, if you can imagine applying that to learning, then that same sort of journey is going to work. Now, there's great mechanics you can hook into in games, things like scaffolding, which is exactly that, hand-holding at the start, showing people the baby steps, then letting them go away to become an expert. So basically that noob to boss triangular movement. We've also got things like instant feedback. You don't want to wait after a 40-minute module to find out that you're not quite getting the content. You want to find out straight away so you can immediately sort of adapt and change to your environment and to your learning strategies. Things like positive failure. If you are getting it wrong, you want to get wrong in a way that actually is a teaching point. And there's also things like replayability. If you've ever played a game where there's like a star rating for a level, and you've come away, you've passed the level, you've only got 1 star, you want to go back and get those other 2 stars, and get 3 stars and max it out. And those sort of things, if you can get people to go back through the content of their own volition, then essentially you're creating this really immersive and engaging content that's going to make people excited. Now, as a real-world example, last year there was the GDPR regulations. This year we've been asked very, very strongly to follow on to that with cybersecurity regulations. It's a real big ask from a lot of our clients globally. So we've created a game to tap into those game mechanics that I've just mentioned. Things where we're asking them to try and basically unpack this, what could be a huge information dump of content. Rather than, I mean, if I told you every type of malware, every type of virus, every type of threat to you as a cyber threat, within a couple of days you've forgotten 80% of that content. So we want to make it boiled down so it's just the bare necessities, what your workers would need to become actually active and understanding of the threats to your company from cyber security problems. And so we've created this game. So to give you a quick view of this game in action. So we've used some of the mechanics. For example, there's scaffolding. There's really simple onboard. We try to minimize the amount of text. And a really simple game mechanic is also a really big key, because you don't want them having to learn the mechanic of the game and then have to learn the content. You want them to have minimal onboarding as possible, so they're actually learning the content and the game becomes really simple. So in this game, all they're doing, they're getting straight away finding out if I've got it right or wrong. It's a really simple mechanic. If you ever are on Tinder, I don't know if you are, I've been married 19 years, I don't know anything about Tinder, but essentially the premise is, if you like it, you swipe one way. If you don't like it, you swipe the other way. So it's a really simple binary mechanic, but that means we can pose loads of different questions at your learners, and really quick they can see where they are. And also there's this simple scaffolding. You start off on level 1. Level 1 tells you like a really simple thing like, is this phishing? You go, and then you can move into different scenarios, more complex stuff as you work through. And also there's a real inbuilt level of mastery required. So you can't just power through the content. You need to show that you actually understand the content before you can get to the top level where the assessment is. And without realizing it, you're answering questions it becomes intuitive, the answers to it. So it's a really quick way of onboarding people into a new bit of regulations. This could be used for any sort of new regulatory work or any sort of new process that you want people to understand in a really quick and sort of powerful way. Now, when this was launched literally a month ago, so we haven't got a huge amount of data on it, but the GDPR version of this, the sister game, exactly the same mechanic, to get people to understand GDPR, which was a huge bit of regulation. We boiled it down into this sort of mechanic, into this sort of game, and it spoke for itself. So essentially, this is data from nearly 25,000 global players. They're on average playing this game for up to half an hour, so some playing for more, which is great because they're actually getting involved in the content. They're not just sort of swiping through it and just getting it done. 26% of the people are playing it in their own time. So not at work, not when you're being designated time to learn. They're actually going away and doing this on the train or while they're commuting or even afterwards. I mean, some people played at the weekend. Compliance training at the weekend, you say? Yes. And also 14% of them were doing it in their own time, as it said. And some people, I'm not going to say crazy, because I think they're just very dedicated, played up to 14 times. So by making this game engaging, and also there's that intrinsic drive to get the best score you can. You actually go back to try and get a high score. So we're talking about game mechanics, but in GDPR regulation. So if you can get your learners as motivated and loving the content as much as they go back and play a compliance game 14 times, you know that it's going to be a really powerful tool to make sure that learning is swallowed down.
Wow, compliance training, half an hour on a weekend. That's unheard of. So the next of the 4 that we're going to be talking about is experience, and we're back on immersive technology now. So at Sponge, we really care about making experiences that are going to, that people are going to love. We know that the best way to learn is to actually experience that for yourself. But sometimes the environment will just not allow you to practice in that environment. For example, if you've got a really risky environment, you don't want to throw people in day one trying to muddle their way through. You want to actually create a safe environment for which people can practice. Now, the great news about the emerging technologies such as VR is that more than ever before, we are able to create a virtual environment that feels really realistic in order to practice, so that when learners get thrown in the real world, they then know what to do. And again, we've got a great example here to show you. You may or may not have heard of this project. It was all over the news when we did it. It's a project we did with the Royal Mail around dog safety. Now, that might sound like a kind of weird niche topic, but it's actually really, really important. Over 2,200 postmen and women a year get bitten by a dog, which is absolutely unbelievable when they came to us with that challenge. So it's really important to let people allow an experience where they can feel what that's like. They say that no one really knows that it's going to happen to them until it does. So what we wanted to do is actually create an experience where people can try out good and bad practice and see the consequences without the risk of getting bitten. But you don't have to just take my word for it. We're going to put the learner first in this experience as well, and hear from the learner's point of view how he found the experience. So this is Sean. He's a real postman, and we went out and met him. Hopefully you can hear it okay. There's subtitles if not.
I went into the driveway of a house. The gates were open. Nothing was in sight. I'm walking over to the front door, and all of a sudden this border collie come off the front lawn. Now, I didn't see the dog until I literally got to the doorstep, and all of a sudden it just lunged at me and got hold of my leg. Hi, I'm Sean Quirk from Thornbury Delivery Office. There was an awful lot of dog attacks last year, so we're doing everything we can to prevent it from happening again. It was a completely different way of learning. I mean, I've never seen a VR be used like that before, bringing it into a place of work and then showing you another way how to do your job safely. It felt like you were actually there, and that's when it become real. So you're almost like thinking, wow, I do need to have extra precaution. I do need to be aware. Comparison to the VR to sitting in a classroom and going through a health and safety talk or whatever, it's absolutely an amazing way to learn. I lighten you to the best way possible to prevent you getting attacked by a dog. Wherever you move your head, it's like you're actually there. So if you focused your aim for a couple of seconds on that question or on that answer, that would then select you for that question or that answer. And I would recommend it not just to Royal Mail, but to any other company that was willing to bring in new technology like this. And thanks to Sponge making the VR, it's completely enlightened me to your surroundings and checking your surroundings before you enter the property where there could be a dog on that premises. So just to prevent anything happening in the future.
So you can see there that Sean has had a really powerful experience in VR, which will be memorable to him. So this obviously lends itself well to kind of safety, but there's also other environments where VR can work really well. So we use the acronym RIDE to help us think of these. So R is for risky. So for example, the Royal Mail, this was a risky environment in which to train. The I is for inaccessible. You may have seen VR experiences, for example, on oil rigs, which are really difficult to get to. And VR gives you a virtual space to then see that. The D is for dangerous. So if you imagine your fire safety training, for example, you might not know that people can apply that knowledge they've learned until they're actually in that situation. But you don't want to be setting buildings on fire to find out. So VR can actually give you a kind of experience with the same kind of emotions and feelings that you'll be going through at the time. And finally, E is for expensive. With that Tetra Pak example, they wanted all of their learners, their thousands across the globe, to see what Tetra Pak was really like. But to fly everyone there would have been super expensive. So if you can give them a virtual experience that they can go through, that's even greater.
Right. We're not suggesting that you get your learners to play Fortnite, but maybe to learn from it. Fortnite, when it was launched, within a month, had 120 million worldwide users. One of the main drivers of that was because it's a very social game. And collaboration is a really powerful tool to use when you're trying to get your learners engaged. Because it obviously asks people to communicate, to work out strategies towards a common goal, to learn from others, and basically see that they're part of a fun and engaging experience. Now, I'm not saying we're going to create Fortnite as a learning tool, but what we're saying is we can really learn from these sort of AAA games. Those sort of things can be really useful. So if you want to create a collaborative game where you want to get people to learn from each other and be engaged, it's a really powerful tool to do that. And also you want to create a game, if you are going to use applied games for that, where you're basically encouraging communication, you're encouraging collaboration, you have a shared goal amongst your players, and also you've got this multiplayer situation where people are working collectively, and you're trying to sort of disencourage things where people are working alone or people working as rogue solo players. You want to really encourage that collaboration. Now, as an example of that in action, you may not have heard of Yum, but if you have, they're the global brand that runs and owns KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, so they're a really big worldwide player. And they have got a real concern around cybersecurity. They wanted to make sure that all their learners were up to speed with cybersecurity. And in conjunction with them, with their cyber team out in Texas, we worked out this new approach which they could then roll out to their workers on road shows, as one-off special events, and then eventually as a big release in September. And the premise of it is a card game, which is your classic sort of table card game that you could play, quite easy to roll out, and then people using their own devices then use the cards to create this whole new interactive, engaging experience. So the premise of this game was, as I said, it's a card game, but then they scan QR codes on the back of the cards, which then throws up VR models using augmented reality so they can find out more about different types of attack, different types of defense. And the game, immediately you have 5 players per game, split into a team of 3 defending, team of 2 as hackers, and that's done by the game itself, so there's no sort of, there's no preempting. So it enables you to straight away throw people in, and they have to form these teams, they have to communicate well to succeed. And once they've launched those models, they can decide to attack each other, and as you saw in that game, there's the attackers are trying their best to get through the server nodes, to try and infect and try and get as much damage done as possible to earn their reputation as a hacker. And at the same time, the security team are trying to defend against these hacks that are happening in real time against like people opposite the table to them. It was a really good, powerful way of getting people to understand the huge range of different cybersecurity threats, from just somebody diving in your bins and nicking receipts and logins and passwords, to much more complicated like DDoS attacks, etc. But from people who had no knowledge, these franchisees running KFC restaurants and Pizza Hut restaurants, they now were much more aware of what the threats were, aware of how these things could be mitigated against. And if you think that this obviously for cybersecurity, but these sort of things could also be rolled out as far as like business simulations, the same sort of idea where you're creating collaborations, you're creating teams where people have to play a role, and in doing so create empathy and understanding of like a different aspect of their company. So it's a really powerful way to ensure that you end up with a team that's got a real buzz around a piece of learning. So this is because it's a social experience, they'll go away and they'll talk about this for days, weeks afterwards. How did you get on? Did you get this attack? And there's some certain little surprises that that if you get a successful hack in there, you can disable the other person's device, those sort of things. So it was really fun piece of work, but at the same time, very, very holistically covered things. Like there's all the embedded learning that you need within the game. So if you want to know what is a DDoS attack, there's a whole list of terminology, a glossary which tells you those things. So without knowing it, sort of implicitly, they're learning. It was a massively powerful thing.
So we've covered a lot of ground there, haven't we? So just to remind you, we've been talking about 2 kind of key technologies, immersive and games, and we've talked about 4 ways within those that you can start utilizing in your own organizations. So the first was exploration. So we saw how Tetra Pak use exploration to give a more kind of holistic view of the company for their new starters.
And we also looked at mastery, so using simple game mechanics to get people engaged. We can see that people are playing outside of their working hours, after hours at weekends, and they're up to 14 times to do a compliance module. So that's a massive boon if you want to get your learners engaged.
Then experience. We care so much about experience at Sponge that we actually have a whole department dedicated to learning experience. Experience gives your people a chance to actually try something before they have to go and do it in the real world, and we saw Royal Mail example there.
And finally, that last example, the Yum example, to show how collaboration really helps to create this sort of motivated and engaged workforce by pulling people together to have a collective goal. So it's much more than just the sum of its parts.
But the main thing we want you to go away with today, if you take nothing else from this talk, or if games and immersive you think aren't the right approach for your learners, the main thing we want you to do is put the learners first. Before you put something out to your learners, think, is this an experience that I would want to go through? Would this excite me? Would this motivate me? Would this make me want to do my job better? And if the answer is no, think about new ways to approach a topic. If you want any kind of advice or questions with that, our stand's just over there. We're happy to talk through kind of any scenario you throw at us, and also tell you a little bit more about immersive and games. But let's finish up with another poll. Get your phones out again.
So we're going to ask you, out of those 4 things that we've highlighted, so for example, exploration, which is more immersive, mastery, which may be more game-based, so quick results. I'm not going to try and skew the results at all, obviously, but mastery is good. See, told you. And experience.
That's 1 vote, Jason.
It's 100%. No, it's going down now. And then obviously exploration and collaboration, which is obviously another really powerful tool. So again, we'll wait till this gets to about 50 returns, and then that should give us a good approximation. So you get your votes in now.
It's quite equal.
Yeah.
That's good. Good news.
But the games are winning out.
The games are winning out. Damn.
And also another little like a caveat to that is a lot of stuff that we design is not aimed so people have to go away with lots of equipment, and there's no barrier to entry. It's much more about mobile first, those sort of things, so people can use their own devices to access this sort of learning. And well, okay, we're going to call it, I think. I'm going to say it's an even split between experience and collaboration.
Amazing.
So it's a win-win.
It's a win-win. Thank you, everyone. That's going to save a lot of fighting later.
So as Lucy said, we're at stand 13. If you want to find out anything more about how we try to get our learners to love learning, come and speak to us. We've got a great team we want to talk to you. And also, we've got some examples of some of those games as well. So, for example, the game mechanic for cybersecurity sorted, that we've got to set up on the stand. And also, any further questions about love? We'll put some love in the room. That sounds good to me. So thank you very much for listening.
Have a wonderful day, and I hope to speak to some of you afterwards.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.